I never meant for anyone to find out this way. Not like this. Not with whispers crawling through my own home. The day I found out I was pregnant, I stood alone in the bathroom, staring at a truth that could destroy everything. And before I could speak, before I could explain, my family had already chosen who to blame. They said it was my stepson. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Sometimes, the most dangerous lies are the ones people want to believe. I married into this family believing love would be enough. My husband, Daniel, was a widower, strong, quiet, a man who carried grief like a second shadow. His son, Ethan, was already 17 when I entered their lives. Too old to see me as a mother, too young to see me as anything else. I tried anyway. I cooked meals he barely touched, went to school events he didn't invite me to, stood in doorways wondering if love could grow in rooms already full of memories. 2 years later, Daniel died suddenly. A heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. Just silence where a man used to be. And suddenly, Ethan and I were left alone in a house that still smelled like grief. People said, "You're still family." But their eyes said something else. They watched us too closely, measured our words, counted the hours. When I started feeling sick in the mornings, I told myself it was stress. Grief does strange things to the body, but deep down, I already knew. The pregnancy test confirmed it in seconds. 2 lines. No mercy. No explanation. Just reality. I didn't tell anyone, not at first, because the truth was complicated, and the lie waiting for me was simple. And in families like ours, simple lies spread faster than complicated truths. The first whisper came from Daniel's sister. She noticed my loose clothes, my silence at dinner. Her eyes lingered too long on Ethan. I felt it then, that shift, that moment when a story begins to write itself without your permission. By the time the rumor reached the rest of the family, it was no longer a question. It was a verdict. And Ethan, who had barely spoken to me in months, was suddenly standing in the center of a fire he didn't start. I tried to speak, but fear held my tongue. Because the truth would destroy one life, and the lie was destroying another.
Suspicion doesn't shout. It whispers.
At first, I thought I was imagining it. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room. The way eyes lingered, then slipped away. The way my name was spoken less and less, until silence replaced it. After Daniel died, his family said they wanted to look after us. But care can be a disguise. It began with concern. Daniel's sister, Margaret, came by one afternoon with groceries I didn't ask for. "You're looking tired," she said, studying my face. "Grief does that." I nodded. She placed her hand lightly on my arm, then let her eyes drift toward the hallway where Ethan's room was. "He's grown so much," she added casually. "Hard to believe he's almost a man now." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. The next week, Daniel's brother invited Ethan out for coffee, just the two of them. When Ethan came home, his face was pale. "He kept asking me questions," Ethan said quietly, "about you, about us, about how long we're alone together." My heart began to race. "They don't believe me," he added. They already decided. The rumors moved faster than truth ever does. At church, I felt it. Women who once hugged me now offered stiff smiles. Men avoided eye contact. One woman leaned toward another and whispered something, then glanced at Ethan sitting beside me. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to demand answers, but fear wrapped itself around my throat. The family meeting was disguised as concern. "We just want clarity," Margaret said, folding her hands politely. "No accusations, just honesty." They sat in a circle like a jury. Every chair felt like a witness stand. Margaret spoke again. "You're pregnant," she said, "and Daniel has been gone for some time." Her eyes shifted slowly toward Ethan. The room followed. Ethan stiffened. "That's what you think?" he asked, his voice barely steady. No one answered. And again, silence delivered the verdict. I opened my mouth, closed it. Fear won, because the truth would expose someone powerful, someone respected, someone Daniel himself had protected. And I was terrified of what would happen if I broke that silence. Ethan stood up. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I swear." Margaret sighed as if disappointed. "We're not saying you did," she replied. "We're saying things look a certain way." That sentence followed Ethan everywhere after that. Things look a certain way. The next days were cruel in quiet ways. Ethan accusations to family dinners. Messages went unanswered. Plans changed without explanation. At school, a teacher pulled him aside and asked if everything was okay at home. Someone had talked. That night, I found him sitting in the dark. "I didn't even know people could look at you like this," he said. "Like you're already guilty." I sat beside him, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of my cowardice. "Please," he said softly, "if you know something, say it." I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But fear doesn't care about love. Margaret came again, this time without groceries. "You should consider what's best for everyone," she said. "For the family name, for the boy." "The boy?" I repeated. She nodded. "Scandals ruin lives." I almost laughed, because Ethan's life was already unraveling. That night, Ethan packed a bag. Just clothes, nothing sentimental. "If I leave," he said, not meeting my eyes, "maybe they'll stop." Something inside me cracked. "No," I whispered. "You won't carry this." But he shook his head. "You already let me," he replied gently. After he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, hands resting on my stomach, heart heavy with truth. I whispered to the child growing inside me, "I should have spoken sooner." Because silence isn't neutral. It chooses a side. By morning, the family had stopped pretending. The whispers were louder, the glances sharper. Ethan rapped through the house like a ghost, and their friends according those toxic devastating. They weren't waiting for the truth. They were waiting for confirmation of with your. And unless I spoke, this voices what grief had started. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a place where judgment had settled into the walls. Ethan moved quietly now. Too quietly. He no longer slammed doors, no longer argued, no longer asked questions. He learned, very quickly, that silence was safer than defending himself. At school, the shift was immediate. Friends who once joked with him suddenly found reasons to sit elsewhere. Teachers watched him longer than necessary. One counselor asked him, gently, if there was anything inappropriate happening at home. The words landed like stones. When he told me, his voice was flat. "They think I'm dangerous," he said. "Like something's wrong with me." I wanted to march into that school and tear every lie apart. But lies, once spoken, don't disappear easily. The family stopped calling altogether. Birthdays passed without messages. Holidays were quietly reassigned. Margaret told people Ethan needed space. What she meant was exile. One afternoon, a neighbor asked me, smiling, "How is your situation?" I understood then. The story had escaped the family. It had grown teeth. Ethan stopped eating properly. I found plates untouched, food scraped into the trash. When I asked him why, he shrugged. Hard to feel hungry when everyone thinks you're disgusting. I sat across from him at the table. "I don't think that," I said. He looked at me then. "Why didn't you stop them?" he asked quietly. The question wasn't angry. That hurt more. At night, I heard him pacing his room, back and forth, like someone trying to outrun a thought that wouldn't let go. I pressed my hands to my stomach and felt the baby shift, life growing, while another was being crushed. The breaking point came without warning. A letter arrived from the school. Concerned about Ethan's emotional stability, suggested counseling, suggested supervision, suggested distance. Distance. From me. From the only adult who should have protected him. I sat on the floor and cried until the words blurred. That evening, Ethan stood in the doorway with his bag. Again. This time, it was heavier. "I'm going," he said, "before this gets worse." "Where?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know," he replied. "But at least if I leave, I won't be the reason you're suffering." That sentence broke me, because the lie had convinced him he was the problem. "You are not the reason," I said. "You never were." He gave a sad smile. "That's not what everyone else thinks." I grabbed his hand, for the first time since all of this began. "I failed you," I whispered, "but I won't let you disappear." He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought love had won. But shame is powerful, and it had already sunk its claws deep. That night, he left anyway. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a note on the counter. "I don't blame you. I just need the noise to stop." The house fell silent. Too silent. Every room echoed with absence. I sat on his bed and pressed my face into his pillow. This was what silence had cost. Days passed. No word, no call. I checked my phone constantly. Fear wrapped itself around every breath. I imagined him sleeping on couches, walking streets he didn't know, believing the lie because no one had corrected it. Finally, a message came. I'm safe. That was all. But safety isn't the same as being okay. That night, I made a decision. The truth had already destroyed enough. If I stayed silent any longer, it would destroy him completely. And this time, I would not let fear choose for me. Because protecting a lie is never worth sacrificing a child. After Ethan left, the house felt hollow. Not empty, hollow. Like something vital had been taken out and never replaced. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every room reminded me of what silence had cost. And for the first time since Daniel's death, I stopped running from the past. I began with his study, a room no one touched anymore. The desk was still neat, too neat. Daniel had always been careful, the kind of man who organized his guilt as meticulously as his papers. I told myself I was only looking for answers, but deep down, I knew I was looking for permission. Permission to finally speak. At first, there was nothing. Bills, old correspondence, legal documents, proof of a respectable life. Then I found the bank statements, payments that didn't make sense, small amounts, regular intervals, always sent to the same account, always marked as personal. My chest tightened. Daniel had never been careless with money. I followed the trail slowly, one document at a time. Receipts, dates, names. And then I saw it. A familiar name. Someone who had stood at Daniel's funeral. Someone who had hugged Ethan. Someone who had whispered condolences while watching a lie destroy a boy. My hands began to shake. I wanted to stop. But once the truth begins to surface, it doesn't let you look away. I searched deeper, behind old files, inside drawers I'd never opened, until I found the envelope. Yellowed with age, unmarked. Inside was Daniel's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The careful loops, the steady pressure. A man who thought he could control the damage, if he controlled the truth. The letter was long, painfully honest. Daniel confessed to protecting someone he believed didn't deserve to lose everything. A mistake made years earlier. A moment of weakness. A consequence he chose to bury. He wrote about fear, about reputation, about choosing silence because it was easier than destruction. And then he wrote about Ethan. If this ever comes out, Daniel had written, make sure the boy is spared. I dropped the letter because the boy hadn't been spared. He had been sacrificed. I sat on the floor for a long time, the weight of it pressing into my chest. Daniel hadn't meant for this to happen, but intentions don't undo damage. They only explain how it began. I realized something then. The family hadn't chosen the lie out of ignorance. They had chosen it out of convenience. It was easier to believe the worst about a boy than to confront the truth about someone respected. The man Daniel protected was still close to the family, still trusted, still treated as honorable. And now, his shadow stretched over everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments. The way Daniel avoided certain conversations. The way he insisted on keeping peace. The way he looked at Ethan sometimes, as if afraid the truth might look back. I wasn't angry at Daniel. I was heartbroken. Because love, without courage, can still destroy lives. By morning, my decision was made. The truth would come out, not to punish, not to shame, but to save what little was left of Ethan's faith in the world. I called him. My hands trembled as the phone rang. When he answered, his voice was cautious. "I found something," I said softly. "Something that explains everything." Silence. Then, "You should have found it sooner," he replied. He wasn't angry. He was tired. "I'm going to tell them," I said. "All of them." A long pause. "Do whatever you need to do," he said quietly. I already learned not to expect much. That sentence hurt more than anger ever could. After the call, I gathered everything: the letter, the documents, the proof. Each piece felt heavier than the last. Because truth doesn't just expose lies, it exposes everyone who stayed silent. As I stood at the door, ready to confront the family, I realized something terrifying. This wouldn't fix everything. Some damage doesn't reverse. But silence had already taken too much. This time, the truth would not arrive quietly. The morning I decided to speak, the house felt heavier than ever. Each step toward the living room was measured. Every breath seemed louder than it should. I carried Daniel's letter, the documents, and a truth too long buried. I gathered everyone, Ethan's aunt, his uncle, distant cousins, and I asked them to sit. Silence fell immediately. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. I began. "I've stayed quiet for too long," I said slowly, letting each word linger. "I didn't speak because I was afraid. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of making things worse." All eyes shifted toward Ethan. He sat stiffly, silent. "I know they've said things," I continued. "They've whispered rumors. And he's been hurt because of my silence." Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Her hands pressed tightly together. Her eyes said what she couldn't speak. "I've found the truth," I said. "Everything Daniel tried to hide, everything that caused this chaos, it's here." I laid the documents on the table, slowly, deliberately. The room's air changed. Faces went pale. Some gasped quietly. Others stared at the papers, unable to look up. The letter explained Daniel's careful protection of a long-forgotten secret. A family friend had made a mistake years ago. Daniel had quietly covered for him. The rumor that Ethan had caused the scandal was entirely false. Margaret finally spoke. We didn't know," her voice faltered. "Perhaps we overreacted." But overreaction hadn't been the only problem. They had let assumptions decide Ethan's life. Ethan didn't say a word. He just stood. And for the first time, I saw the weight lift slightly from his shoulders. Not completely, but enough to breathe. Weeks passed after that day. Apologies came slowly. Some hearts stayed guarded. But the truth had broken the chain of lies. It had freed Ethan. Life returned in its own quiet way. I focused on the child I carried. Now, with honesty guiding every step, I felt less fear. Each kick reminded me, life continues, even after betrayal. Ethan began to rebuild his life. He returned to school, slowly reestablishing friendships. He didn't forget the pain, but he learned forgiveness. Not because it was easy, but because holding on to anger had nearly destroyed him. I visited him one evening at his new apartment. We sat together on the couch, the kind of silence that wasn't awkward, but comforting. "I never blamed you," I whispered. "You shouldn't have carried their judgment." He smiled faintly. "Thank you," he said. "Now, I see who really cares, who really matters." Months turned into years. The child was born into honesty, into love, into a home where fear didn't rule, a home where truth mattered more than appearances. Daniel's family never fully healed. Some bridges remained broken, some hearts remained cautious. But the bond between Ethan, the child, and me was unshakable, stronger than the whispers, the rumors, the lies. And in that quiet, I've finally understood. Secrets can destroy, but truth, even when delayed, can rebuild a life. Love survives when honesty guides it. Forgiveness survives when courage leads it. And family is the people who stay after the lies are gone. Thank you for watching. More again. If you were in this situation, what choice would you have made? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one.